Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good afternoon, everyone. Phil Pinarski here with the News 8 Live Desk. Hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. I know I'm about to, because we have a very super special guest on the Live Desk today. It was difficult going to the movies probably in the 1980s without seeing his face, and he's coming to Grand Rapids next week. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. C. Thomas Howell is our guest here on the Live Desk today. Tommy, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And, before we get into everything, talking a little bit about that event that you're going to be here, I got to ask, have you ever been to Grand Rapids before? Is this going to be your first time coming up?
It's been a while, but I have never been there in the middle of a winter storm, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, right. Could not have picked, honestly, a better time to go, really experiencing that Michigan winter. And of course, I do want to remind everybody you can find a lot more information on the event that is happening next Thursday at Wealthy Theater. We're going to be going over it. You're actually, Tommy, you're going to be part of a showing of The Outsiders, one of your more prominent roles. You're going to be doing a Q&A session, meeting fans afterwards, kind of talking a little bit about the making of that film, some of your experiences. We're going to be talking a little bit about that in just a little bit, but I got to ask, with sort of this template of an event like that, is this something you've done before? Is this something you truly enjoy kind of doing, getting to meet the fans, also talking about your experiences?
You know, I've recently started a nonprofit called the Stay Gold Foundation, and that platform gives me the opportunity to connect with our younger people who are really struggling these days with the ability to express themselves outside of a device. So the reason why I took this on upon myself was to be able to really connect with these people and express the importance of literacy, reading and writing. You'd be surprised, Phil. I've signed some autographs for young people, and they stare at that piece of paper and they wonder, what the heck, does that say? Cursive writing isn't something that is even in their universe these days. So for me to be able to put together a Q&A, use a platform like The Outsiders, which is so family friendly. Of course, that book is required reading in approximately 75% of the schools across America. The teachers are really able to connect with kids who aren't really prone to picking up a book. I cannot tell you how many Stay Gold tattoos I have seen over the years, and many beautiful stories have been shared with me regarding the film itself. And a lot of people can really connect with that cast. And people don't know that Tom Cruise got his start there, or that's where Ralph Macchio began his karate efforts before it all turned into Cobra Kai. But for me, I really go to connect with the people, and it's an opportunity to do so. We do have a Q&A, and that's a large part of the. That's an exciting part for me, because when it's interactive, then we are really connecting one-on-one, even though it might be an audience of 300 or 400 people, and sharing my experiences when it comes to making the film, working with people like Francis Ford Coppola, an incredible filmmaker, and of course the author of the book, Essie Hinton, who was 16 years old when she wrote that piece, which to me is mind-boggling. So I look forward to seeing families, friends, students, teachers, and connecting over this wonderful piece of literature.
I definitely want to talk about the movie and your experience in just a little bit, but you have a very interesting career that I also want to talk about. I was doing a little bit of research on sort of your beginning, The Outsiders being one of your first movies, but that's not really kind of how you got your start. It was actually an E.T. was your first movie, and I got to ask how you decided to move into the direction of acting, because I know that you are a big fan of bull riding, and your dad was also a stunt coordinator. He was actually in The Fisher King, I found out, which is super interesting. I mean, talk to me about kind of growing up and having that experience, on the ranch, I guess, and then deciding, I also have this kind of talent for acting as well, and then moving more so into that role.
Well, my father rode bulls for 10 years for a living before he became a stuntman. He coordinated projects like Urban Cowboy, Moonlighting with Bruce. Uh, he was a prominent stuntman and has recently retired. His last project was a show that was quite popular called Longmire, and I grew up wanting to be a professional cowboy and figured that eventually I would probably fall into what my father had been doing and become a stuntman. And very early on, it's sort of out of the blue, my father had a commercial agent. Believe it or not, he was the Marlboro Man at one point, and so he did quite a few commercials when he was younger. And I'd go with him once in a while to the agency when he needed to pick something up or drop something off. And one particular trip, the commercial agent was visited by the theatrical department and said they were looking to cast a movie with some youngsters called E.T. And they set up an appointment for me. And I went into this meeting and met Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall. And lo and behold, I walked away with the role.
Ever since then, I mean, you really haven't looked back. You've starred in stuff over the past 4 decades. As I said earlier, really specifically in those 80s, I think my parents, I've watched all of the 80s movies because they grew up watching them as well. Really wouldn't be the same without you in some of those major roles. And kind of looking back, do you ever, decades later, look back at that time, the 80s in particular, and really reflect on that moment and just realize kind of the power or the sort of star power that you had during that time? And what sort of emotions kind of come with that?
You know, in the 80s and early 90s in particularly, movies were very special. We had magazines, we had movies, that was it. We didn't have devices that connected us to the rest of the planet. So, you know, when you were in a movie, it was a big deal. They were red carpet events. They were expensive. They were all shot on literal film. Today, you know, pretty much anybody with an iPhone can get out there and make themselves a film. So it was a different time. I feel blessed having worked with people from the golden era of Hollywood, people like Elizabeth Taylor, who I did a movie with, Anne Margaret, the incredible Anne Margaret, who I did a movie with. Really learned a lot from people like that who shared wonderful stories with me about people like Elvis or Rock Hudson or James Dean or Richard Burton. You know, these are names that the young people today don't really know of, but I feel blessed having caught the tail end of that special time when Hollywood was a magical place.
And I do see that we have a few more people tuning in now to the show, so I do want to reintroduce you. This is C. Thomas Howell. He is the star of The Outsiders and so many other movies throughout the years. He's going to be making a stop at Wealthy Theater next Thursday for a screening of The Outsiders. You can check it out. Tickets are still on sale. You can find them right now over on woodtv.com. Tommy, I want to shift now over to The Outsiders. It was a book that I read in school. Like you said, that's sort of the time when people are introduced to it, but I've watched that movie so many times. Like I said, my parents, super big fans of it, always tuning in to watch that. And I don't want to give too much away because I know you're going to be talking a lot more about it during the event, but I do want to ask, and you touched on it too, about the names that are associated with this movie. Tom Cruise getting his start, Ralph Macchio, Patrick Swayze, Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez. You just an insane lineup, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, at the time, did you kind of, as a young actor, sort of know that this cast, these players in this movie were going to go on and do amazing things? I mean, was that sort of something you all kind of talked about or all sort of envisioned?
Well, we all loved the book.
Yeah.
It was a special piece of material. And Francis Ford Coppola is no slouch, as you know. Multi-Oscar award winner, Godfather, Godfather 2, Apocalypse, and many, many, many more. Some of my favorite movies. And of course, the talented cast that you just named went on to have some of the biggest careers in the history of Hollywood. So we didn't actually have expectations during filming other than knowing that there was a responsibility to S.E. Hinton and to Francis to be our best at all times. And of course, when you do make a movie, everybody has the highest hopes. But the fact that um, it has become sort of a part of American pop culture over the years was something none of us could have ever expected. And I'm just so grateful that the kids, every year I get a new batch of 13, 14-year-old fans who been introduced to the book at school, and they screen the film afterwards, and they contact my social media crying because Johnny Cade and Dally have passed away. And then they find out that Pony Boy's 58 years old, and they really start crying.
Yeah, no, that is something that is super interesting about this particular movie. It's sort of past that cult classic status, I feel like. It's been more than 40 years since that movie came out, but I see people every day, like you said, new people, new fans of the book, new fans of the movie. I think I saw a TikTok video the other day of people talking about it. It's just interesting because it's something that even I grew up, years after the movie came out, something that really sat with me and made me think about it. And now people that are younger than me are doing the same thing. I mean, what do you think is really the lasting legacy behind this story? Whether people read it in the book or watch the movie, what do you think they really are just taking home with them and it really speaks to them?
Phil, there's a character for everybody in this piece, no matter what side of the tracks you're from. And we all dealt with that in school. Whether you dreamt of being one of the cool kids or whether you were the coolest kid, whether you were the prom queen or the football captain, or whether you were, the little nerdy guy just hoping that you wouldn't get, pushed around in the hallways. There's a character for everybody in this piece. And I think it gives everybody hope. It's a story about a group of, and again, you have to understand, when we made The Outsiders, Phil, they weren't making films about kids for kids. And this was one of the first young teenage or young adult pieces of literature that really had impact. The fact that Susie Hinton was only 16 years old when she wrote it is phenomenal. And there's a lesson there for all of us. But I think it's extremely relatable because of those reasons. And if Susie set out to write that book today, I don't think it would have had the impact that it had when she wrote it as a 16-year-old, because she was living that life herself. And it's authentic, it's truthful, it has value, and people relate to it.
Absolutely. I definitely think that that's something to kind of take note of, is just the time that it came out in and just how everything was able to line up perfectly for that. And of course, everybody, I want to remind you that you can actually catch a screening of the film at Wealthy Theater next Thursday. C. Thomas Howell will be in attendance hosting a Q&A, talking about his experiences as well. It's going to be an awesome event for sure. But what in particular, obviously everybody's going to enjoy seeing the movie, getting to meet you as well, but what do you hope they really take away from a movie like this? You said that the story really speaks to you. It speaks to a lot of people. For people that are seeing it for the 100th time or for the first time, what do you hope that they take home with you for this specific event?
I'm just looking forward to getting these kids to put their phones down for a minute, hold a conversation, communicate a little bit, feel something possibly inspirational or motivational when it comes to their own self-value or their own self-worth. The ending of the film and the ending of the book is Ponyboy beginning the very first chapter of the novel himself. I feel that our youth today struggle with self-value and self-worth. They're reminded every day on social media of everything that they don't have. And there's very little that comes out of social media and these devices that are in their pockets that make them feel worthy and special. And 5 years ago, Phil, I'd go to a classroom and I'd ask kids if anybody was interested in the arts, and about half of them would raise their hands. They'd want to be songwriters or actors or musicians or painters. Today I go to these schools and I ask that question and nobody raises their hand. And I ask, what is their interest? What would they like to be? And I'd say 70% of them answer with, I want to be an influencer, or I want to be famous. How can I be famous? Nobody wants to know how to do the work that supports that process. They're wanting to jump to the end. Well, I try to preach it's about being connected in the moment, 100% committed, 110% unattached, and do the work for the sake of the work. Don't do the work for the outcome. Don't do the work to be loved. Don't do the work to be liked. We all want to be appreciated, Phil, but to really be a good artist, you can't be focused on the work that you're doing, the task at hand, and worried about whether it's going to be accepted or not. You have to let that go, and hopefully the best will happen.
That is beautifully said. I'm fired up right now, Tommy. I got to tell you, that was a great bit of advice. I can't thank you enough. So everybody watching, if you want to also get a little bit of inspiration, unwind a little bit, put that phone down, you can definitely do that this coming Thursday at Wealthy Theater for a screening of The Outsiders. C. Thomas Howell will be there in attendance. Tickets are on sale right now. You can find out where to get them simply by checking out our story right now on woodtv.com. Tommy, thank you so much for being here today. It was an honor.
Thank you so much, Phil. We appreciate you.
Of course. I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the News 8 Live Desk. I'm Phil Penarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.